Paul Johanis, who will be giving this evening's presentation on protecting and preserving green space in Ottawa Gatineau. Paul is the chairperson of Greenspace Alliance, a nonprofit volunteer organization dedicated to protecting and preserving natural spaces in Canada's National Capital Area. He will speak about the importance of urban green spaces and working with individuals, community, and municipal, provincial, and federal governments to advocate for protective policies, plans, and legislations. After Paul's presentation, there will be ample opportunity for everyone to engage in discussion and to reflect on how we ourselves as individual, community member, or organizational participant might collaborate on local environmental action. Paul, welcome to Environmental Café 613. We're looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Sherry, and good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here, have the opportunity to speak with you tonight about something that we all care about deeply, I think. I have a presentation slide. I'll just share my screen to bring it up. Be just a second. Is it visible for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm here tonight to talk about Greenspace, the Greenspace Alliance, the organization that I'm associated with. But before talking about what we do, what the Greenspace Alliance is and what we do and how we do it, we'll get to that later on. I thought I'd spend a little bit of time starting off to just talk about green space in Ottawa. What do we mean by green space in Ottawa? And when we say we want to protect and preserve green space, what does that really refer to? So I'll start with some geography. It's kind of a geography lesson to start tonight. Because really green space, it says right there, it's about an area. It's about what we have in terms of land use in a particular location. In this case, the city of Ottawa. What do we consider to be green space in the city of Ottawa? The city of Ottawa is unusual, really, in its boundaries, in its geography. This map of the city of Ottawa shows this red line here all around. That's actually the city limits of the city of Ottawa. Now you see that within the city limits of the city of Ottawa, so there's one mayor and 24 councillors that are responsible for this large area called the city of Ottawa, which stretches all the way from Burritts Rapids, way, way, way south on the Rideau Canal system, almost out to Arnprior in the west, and way out past Cumberland to the east, bounded by the Ottawa River, of course. So within the area of the city of Ottawa, we have a large rural space. This is all rural. It's the city of Ottawa, but it's rural. In that rural area, there are, I think at last count, 24 actual villages like Greeley or Metcalfe or Kenmore or Osgood or North Gore or Constance Bay. These are all villages within the city of Ottawa, in the rural part of the city of Ottawa. So in a way, when we talk about green space, the very first and largest green space that the city of Ottawa has is its rural area. This is a vast area of agricultural and rural and wetlands. And the city and all of its residents, including rural and urban residents, enjoy and the benefits of having this green space all around the city of Ottawa. So the job of the elected officials of the city of Ottawa is to look after not only the urban part, but all of this rural part as well. Now, this is a reality for the city of Ottawa since the amalgamation, since 2001, when all of these other areas, these rural areas, were individual townships with their own reeves and councils and so on. But since 2001, it's all amalgamated into one city. And so our largest green space, it's all of this area here. In the darker, in the green here, this is actual forested area. This is the Marlborough Forest here, the Tor Bolton Forest there. All of the Goulburn provincially significant wetlands out in here. And then the lighter spaces here, this is all agricultural land. We see more agricultural land to the east and south of Ottawa, but it's all green space. And so in our mandate and activity as the Greenspace Alliance, we care as much, in fact, more in a way, about rural green space, because we're always at risk of losing rural green space to the constant spreading of this, what we see here, this area, this purple area, is the urban part of Ottawa. So I'll just go and sort of focus in on it a bit more. So the urban part of Ottawa is shown here in purple. And what we see in green is the green belt. So the green belt is entirely within the urban area of Ottawa. It's another very distinct and very valuable green space that we definitely care about and are always looking to preserve and protect. Inside the green belt, so this is like the inner urban area, city core, densely populated, older established areas. Outside of the green belt, we have Canada, Stittsville, we have Barrhaven, Riverside South, and Orleans out here. So the newer suburbs are shown here outside the greenbelt. So this line here, this dividing line that's all squiggly here, all along, this line is called the urban boundary. This is the line that establishes where you can build dense urban forms of living, communities, neighborhoods. Outside the urban boundary, there's a whole different regime of zoning and a permissible use of land, with agricultural use, light industrial use, forestry use. And a lot of these areas are also part of something called the natural heritage system, so protected environmental lands, all throughout this rural area. So green space in Ottawa means many different things just because of the geography, the size of Ottawa, and all of these figure in the kinds of things that all of us, I think, have a benefit from protecting and preserving. Now, I bring up the urban boundary here because every 5 years, well, first off, the city has an official plan, something called the official plan. The official plan is a land use plan. It establishes what kind of land use you can have in different parts of the city. So it's in this official plan that this urban boundary is established. And every 5 years, there's a new process for establishing where and if we need to expand this urban area, expand the urban boundary to accommodate population growth in the city of Ottawa. So every 5 years, there's an exercise of doing population projections over the next 25 years. And then based on those projections, there's a calculation, a determination of how much additional urban land is required to accommodate that population. So the reason we see all these squiggles here along this line is that every 5 years, little chunks of land are added here and there at different ends of the city, south, east, west. And some people call that urban sprawl. That's kind of a derogatory term. But what we know for sure is that this is always eating up more rural land. And so it creates a loss of green space. So that's why our organization and many of our associated organizations work to try and contain urban sprawl, try to discourage this constant expansion, urban expansion into the rural areas, because we lose agricultural land, forested land, wetlands that are all around the urban boundary. So that's major green space for us is the rural area, and protecting that rural area is one of our major preoccupations. Now, other types of green spaces, we sort of classify major urban green space. So this is all within the urban area. We just saw on the previous map, the green belt, very large green space. It's managed by the National Capital Commission. No development, no residential development is permitted in the green belt. It doesn't actually have official protection other than it's owned and managed by the federal government. And so we're always a little bit on tenterhooks as to whether and when some development occurs in the greenbelt, because we know that the greenbelt has as its as one of its uses institutional use, and so there are government installations in the greenbelt, and have been there for a very long time. And sometimes there are some little additions or little changes there. But that's certainly one of the major urban green spaces that Ottawa enjoys and that we try to protect. Another very large green space in the urban area is the Central Experimental Farm, another federally owned and operated green space. It's actually an active research station. It's a scientific laboratory stuck in the middle of the city of Ottawa. We, of course, enjoy it very much for its green space value. It provides tremendous ecological benefits for local residents, for urban residents. And also, it has a lot of value as a heritage property. It's been around. It was established in 1886, I believe, and has been operating ever since as a scientific research station for agricultural production. Other major green spaces in the city of Ottawa are the large federal parks like Vincent Massey Park, Rockcliffe Park, the whole network of cycling paths and parkway corridors that connect up these parks throughout the city. These are very valuable green spaces for urban residents who enjoy having access to these green spaces. So all of these are sort of surface level actual areas, it's acreage on the ground that's considered green space. But there's another very important major urban green space, and that's the green space that's 10 meters off the ground, the canopy of all of our trees. So the urban forest canopy is a very important, very large green space that covers the urban area, but it covers it very unevenly. Some parts of our city have very low canopy coverage. Other parts are very well treed and have quite a lot of many trees, many large mature trees that provide the shading and cooling and filtering and water management that trees provide. And so there's a measurement that only just was once made by the city and the NCC of the canopy cover, a percentage of tree canopy by area within Ottawa Gatineau. This is the 2017 picture of it. It was supposed to be repeated 5 years later in 2022, but pandemic slowed things down, but now the aerial photography has been done and satellite work has been done, and we're expecting this year to see an update to this map that shows the percentage of canopy cover for different parts of the city. So we can see out in the western rural area here, there's quite a lot, 48% or plus canopy cover. The very dark areas here, like part of the green belt, we see 65% canopy cover. But some of the newer suburbs actually You see very, very low canopy cover because these are new suburbs that have only very small trees planted everywhere. And they've mostly had any prior existing trees cut down as part of the development. And we see in the core, of course, we have lower canopy cover. And so this is an important and very large green space or aspect of green space that is part of what we try to protect and preserve as well. And then other green spaces, kind of a catch-all, other green spaces that we work to preserve and protect. Something is called urban natural features. So within the urban part of the city of Ottawa, there are many little woodlots and meadows and green open areas that are recognized by the city as deserving of protection and preservation. And these urban natural features, we want to try and maintain so that they're not developed over, so that these types of natural elements that are close to where people live, places like I don't know if you know where Hampton Park is, small wooded area off of Island Park Drive, near the 417. It's considered an urban natural feature. Mud Lake near Britannia, another wooded area there, a little woodlot. It's an urban natural feature, and so on. So that's the type of property which is mostly city owned or NCC owned sometimes, that are considered urban natural features that we want to protect. And another type of very common green space that we enjoy and that residents make great use of are all the city parks. So all the city parks, sometimes they're just all grassed over as sports field, but in a way we don't discriminate. If it's green, we want to retain it. And so whether it's treed or just low bush or shrubs or meadows and fields, that's all green space from our perspective, and that we're all interested. So that's just a general overview of what we mean by green space in the city of Ottawa. And when we say, well, we want to try and protect green space, well, that's what we're trying to protect. This is just our mission and kind of vision statement. So the Greenspace Alliance works with community organizations and individuals to preserve and enhance natural areas in the National Capital Area, including public and private green spaces, wetlands, and waterways. And so concerned residents formed the Alliance in October 1997. So we've been around since then as a nonprofit volunteer organization. And an important part of our work involves engaging with all levels of government and other stakeholders. And so we believe that urban greenness is essential for a community's quality of life, contributing to our personal, social, economic, cultural, and spiritual well-being. Greenspace also connects us with the natural and cultural history of our region. So this is the kind of ethos that is behind the work that we do. That's really what drives us. So now we'll talk a little bit more about the Greenspace Alliance. So what is it? It's a nonprofit organization registered as a corporation under federal authority. We operate as such a corporation. We have a board of directors. I'm the chairperson of the board. We are a membership organization, so we have members. We're not a large organization. Our members are actually, we range always around 30 members. Now, members are all kind of active members who do stuff to try and preserve and protect green space as described earlier. But we also have a subscriber list. And so we have another 200 or so interested residents who keep abreast of developments and with whom we communicate on a regular basis. Now, why green space? In our mission and vision statement, we expressed why, but in the last 10 years or so, we have come to realize that it's also a major component in the fight to mitigate climate change. Not only to mitigate climate change, but to adapt to climate change, having the benefit of shade and trees around to help us deal with higher temperatures. is an important aspect of Greenspace, plus all kinds of other benefits that Greenspace provides in terms of stormwater management. All of the effects of climate change are either mitigated or are used to be more resilient in the face of climate change. So how do we do this? Well, it's on two fronts, really. I'll start with threats to green space. So we're alerted on a regular basis to threats to green space. So somebody out there will contact us to say, oh, we've just seen some construction crews here next to this woodlot near our house. We're really upset. Can you come and find out what's going on? And so responding to these kinds of threats to green space is one of the ways that we work. One of the axes of our action, of our activity. Another part of our work, though, it deals with policy. And so trying to work with federal, provincial, and municipal governments so that policies that are adopted that protect and preserve green space so that we can, before the fact, avoid the threats to green space because we have in place appropriate policies, regulations, legislation, plans to maintain or improve our green space assets in the city of Ottawa. So those are the two main axes of our work. Now, and our actual activities, well, we're always monitoring. Our corporate name is Greenspace Watch. It used to be our official name, but it is the name under which we're incorporated. But we're also known as the Greenspace Alliance of Canada's capital. So monitoring and and getting this kind of information, not just on threats to green space, but changes to legislation, changes to programs, changes to policy at every level, whether it's federal, provincial, or municipal. We stay on top of that. We educate ourselves and educate others about these things, about the threats that we are alerted to, about the policy changes that we are privy to or that we've been advised of. And having educated ourselves and others, then we're in a better position to advocate for the protection and preservation that we see is threatened or that we'd like to see established for the green spaces that we're trying to protect. We might even sometimes agitate. We're not big agitators, but sometimes we will want to go out and demonstrate, be part of a crowd, be part of, somewhere at City Hall and saying, please pay attention to this. Please hold the line on urban expansion, for example, or when Provincial Bill 23 came out, please, Government of Ontario, please change this bill, which provided, there's huge risks to wetlands and loss of significant wetlands as a result of that bill. So when there's serious matters like this, we might get, we'll work with others to demonstrate and make known publicly our disapproval or support. And finally, sometimes we'll litigate. We haven't really sued anyone, but we've launched appeals before. We've been parties in appeals because some of these decisions are open to appeal, and you can have them reviewed in that kind of way. So these are the kind of activities that we're engaged in trying to protect and preserve green space through response to threats and work on policy formulation. So I just thought I'd give a few examples of the kinds of things we have worked on, and some of the our work isn't always successful, but sometimes it is, and so it's worth reporting on those things that work out. I mentioned earlier on the city's official plan. Being involved in the development of the official plan is crucial. If you miss that boat, you don't get a chance later on. Once that plan is in place, it's going to be there for at least 5 years and probably longer. So we really need to participate early on in the development of the official plan, taking up advantage of every opportunity that up for consultation. If the city reaches out to us, and make sure we're available and can provide input. And our experience has been that collective involvement really works in the context of this official plan. The official plan is a huge thing. It's a big document, it's a 300-page plan. And so it requires a lot of collaboration. And so in the last round of official plan, which was like 2018 to 2023, the new official plan was just adopted in 2023. So in that 2023 official plan, we worked with a coalition, the People's Official Plan Coalition. We felt that environmental and climate was not really being looked after sufficiently well in the draft official plan that we saw. So we thought maybe we'll need to establish our own collective consultation amongst ourselves and get back to the city with proposals that we think are needed at this time. This official plan coalition, People's Official Plan Coalition, started off with 4 members. We were one of the founding members: Ecology Ottawa, Café, Community Associations for Environmental Sustainability, and the Federation of Citizens Associations were the kind of founding members. But over time, it kind of developed and spread. We have about 20 member organizations now that meet biweekly, that work on specific issues, that develop common positions on official plan policies and implementation of official plan policies. So individuals and organizations working together this way really does bring results. We saw major improvements in the official plan as a result of this advocacy work that we did collectively this way. And when the draft official plan finally came back to City Council for approval, large numbers of motions to amend that draft were developed by us, by civil society, were presented and adopted by City Council. So we didn't get everything we wanted out of that official plan advocacy work, but we got a lot, and we were happy with the outcome. And it established a good working relationship with many of the officials at the City Hall who saw benefits to collaborating with a group that not only is interested, but has deep experience and knowledge base in working on these kinds of projects. Another difficult file. Now, these are files that work out over like a 6-7 year period. So these aren't things that you get done in a month or 2 months. Like the official plan, the very first meetings was called Beyond 2036 visioning meetings. They started in 2017. And so it takes a long time to develop and bring in a new official plan. So these you need staying power, and you need groups that are willing to work together for a long period of time to achieve the results. The Central Experimental Farm, as you know, like we consider a major green space. We worked with the Coalition to Protect the Farm. That was a group of people from scientists, actually from the scientific community, heritage people from Heritage Ottawa and other heritage communities, members, and ourselves, local communities, local neighborhoods. And this was all about the controversy regarding the location of the new hospital. So the Civic Hospital on Carling Avenue was built in 1924. It's really coming to the end of its useful lifespan. And so the plan was to build a new hospital, and originally the location was established to be right across the street from the Civic Hospital on research lands, on Central Experimental Farm research lands. We saw this as a big risk to the loss of the farm, because if you could develop part of the farm that's actually part of the main central raison d'etre of the farm, which is research, scientific research, then you lose you just lose the farm basically. If you can build a hospital on research fields, you can build anything on any other research fields. And so that led to another very long, like 4 or 5 year process, which in the end ended up, we think it's a win-win outcome, although many people don't see it as a win. But because in the end, the hospital was located not on the research fields of the farm, but on the headquarters, where the headquarters and parking lot of Agricultural Canada used to be. And so it's still, in a way, technically on Central Experimental Farm property, but it took away some of the local green space that the people did enjoy. But it was an opportunity. It was a case where we worked very closely together with other partners, with the NCC, like not only just civil society, but with city staff, the NCC. We even collaborated with the hospital staff. I chaired a group called the Campus Engagement Group for a couple of years to continue working with the hospital to try and make sure that we can achieve outcomes that were positive for all parties involved. Other examples, this is very recent. This is only just decided in the last few months. Mer Bleu is another very distinct and important green space for Ottawa. It's in the eastern end of the city. It's a remnant from the glaciation when the ice melted away from Ottawa's area around 8,000 years ago. There was another channel of the Ottawa River that sort of flowed through there, and we have a very large wetland, a very large peat moss depot there. And it's a very, very sensitive green space. It's internationally recognized. It's given a designation under a convention called Ramsar, which is an international convention. It's in the green belt, and it's it's somewhat protected. But there was a proposal to build an extension to a road called the Brian Colburn Drive in newly developed parts of Orleans. So to build a new road and bus rapid transit corridor through the Greenbelt, very, very near the Mer Bleu, maybe just 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers north of the boundary of the Mer Bleu bog. And so that was definitely seen as a big threat to Greenbelt and to a tremendous asset in the Greenbelt, which is Mer Bleu. So we worked closely with the NCC again, with all of our partners through the POP People's Official Plan Coalition, with additional members, like additional parties like the Ottawa Peel Naturalist Club, and also with the local neighborhood community, because through our work with the Federation of Citizens Associations, we have good contacts throughout the community associations that are where we know chair and board members from community associations. So there's a community association there in that part of Orleans, Greater Avalon, I guess is the name of the neighborhood. And so we knew the local area there. And we could recognize that they had very serious transportation problems. They just couldn't get out of these new suburbs that have been built at massive scale, but without the infrastructure, without the transit, without the road access. So we recognize the issues for the local community, but at the same time we were dedicated to protecting the Greenbelt. But in the end, as a result of this back and forth collaborative work, a win-win solution was attained. The NCC did permit use of a part of the Greenbelt, but on a much reduced road corridor. The priority transit access is going to be provided, but not through the Greenbelt, using an existing corridor for the Blackburn Hamlet bypass. And a part of a road that ran through there called Renault Road will be closed and renaturalized. And that's the part of the road that's the closest to the Greenbelt, to the Mer Bleu bog. So in the end, this is a win-win, and I think everyone feels like that around the table: the local community, the environmental community, the NCC, the City of Ottawa. So these are just examples of the kinds of files we work on, and like I said, this ran over a 7-year period. We were only really active for the last 3 years of that period, 3-4 years, but long, drawn-out types of work. Last two things here in the presentation quickly is we don't only protect and preserve, we also try to create new green space or promote new green space. And so we've in the past worked on something called the Poet's Pathway. And that's a walking trail through green space, encircling the interurban area of Ottawa, right from Britannia Beach to Beechwood Cemetery. So it goes all around, more or less like the Greenbelt. And we worked with the local community group and to help establish this trail. It's marked by 14 plaques commemorating famous Canadian poets and their works based on nature. And there's a website and there's a trail map, something we work with. We just walked it again last year, actually, just to see how it was, and we took it by chunks because it's quite long. It's about 40 kilometers long and all, and so. Most of it is still pretty good. There's a few areas where we know we should go back and spruce up a bit, but it's something that's on our work program for this year. And more recently, we worked on something called the Pinnissy Portage Trail. That's a walking trail from New Edinburgh Park to Rockcliffe Park. And we were working with a group called Kitchissippi Trails, a group that's dedicated to identifying and reestablishing and promoting Indigenous portage trails in the Ottawa area. And this particular trail is a walking trail that commemorates a historical portage that connected the Rideau River to the Ottawa River around Rideau Falls. And it's named after Chief Pinnissy, who was the leader of the local Algonquin peoples in the area at the time of settlement. So in the late 1790s, but mostly early 1800s when Billman Wright first came in here, and then later on in 1826 when Bay came and Ottawa started. So in that period, that the chief Constant Pinnissy was the chief. So the trail's been named after him. There's a nice mural that was commissioned and is up on the wall of the New Edinburgh Fieldhouse. And it's a very nice little trail to just follow and realize, oh yeah, there was a portage here, 300 years ago. So that's another project, the kinds of projects that we do. Anyway, so that's the Greenspace Alliance, who we are, what we do, why we do it. If you're interested to find out more information, you can visit our website. We have a Facebook page and a Twitter account. Not very active recently, but it's available to communicate, to connect with more people. So that's my presentation for tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions or hear any comments that you have to make on this topic.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much, Paul. Very interesting and informative presentation. I think I learned quite a bit about the city that I didn't know before, and about green space in general. And certainly the examples that you shared with us show the importance of the work that the Greenspace Alliance and its partners, other organizations out there and individuals have been doing, and the benefit of a collaborative approach with the various levels of government and institutions. It seems like, you've really got some great success stories and, benefits that have accrued to the citizens of Ottawa from the work that's been done. So kudos to you, and you don't get to rest on your laurels. Keep up the wonderful work. So I'd like to open it up for any reflections or questions or comments, as you've said. And yeah, if you raise your hand, then Paul, I think, can see you and call on you.
So I think Eric and then Stephen, I think, had their hands up, and then Linda R.
Well, thank you very much. That was most informative. Before Canada was this thing called the Migratory Bird Flyway. And it's been completely changed with redirecting the water and minimizing the wetlands and building all over Canada from March Road to the southern part of Canada. Was that ever mentioned as a protected space?
Canada started in the mid-60s, and with the very first Beaverbrook development was from that period. And so I don't know whether at that time there was any designation as protected for. I don't believe there was, but I don't know that for a fact. However, the area north of Canada, like I live in Canada, and so anyone who lives in Canada who thinks they can get to the Ottawa River really quickly, they're wrong. You can't get to the Ottawa River if you're in Canada. You have to go way to the east, either to Shirley's Bay or way to the west to get beyond the rifle range, because that whole area there, the Connaught Rifle Range, is north of Canada, between Canada and the river, for a good, I'd say, 15 kilometers. And all of that area, is DND, so it's federal, but the western part of that area is a crown preserve, which is a very special level of protection. And part of the rationale for it being a crown preserve is the bird migratory pathway aspect. That's one of the reasons it's recognized. So out of all of the protected green spaces in Ottawa, I think that's probably the most protected. We know that it has a high population of landing turtles. It has very free shorebirds. It's fantastic. Like Innes Point there is you can't get to it. It's private. Well, not private, but it's fenced off. You need special permission to get in there. But it's very well known for high numbers of migrant birds, shorebirds. And it's an albar. It's a large albar. That the river, the actual geology of it is also unique. And so it's a very, very valuable piece of green space. It happens to be just north of Canada, so I would connect it up as to your question, in that it is taken into account in that way. Elsewhere in Canada, no, I don't think so.
Thank you.
I think Stephen?
Yes, there in the downtown area of Ottawa, there's quite a few groups. I'm involved with some of them that are working very hard on green space development in like Centertown, Old Ottawa South, and some of the other areas. And it's a very steeply uphill battle. We have in Centertown maybe 2% or something like that of the land space is actual city park. And according to the city plan, it should be many, many times larger than that. So there's we notice a big discrepancy between what the city plan says, which sounds very nice, and what the will to make certain changes is. So it's an interesting area. Some of the groups are have now had 2 or more years of doing tree canopy surveys and collecting other information on trees and the state of trees in the inner city. I also wanted to ask about in the rural areas, is there any way that it's possible for a large like forest area to be set aside, or are there too many limits within the city or the provincial government to say, let's set this area aside for at least 100 years and not do any kind of urban type development there at all? Is that something that's possible?
I'll answer both the central urban and the rural part. I'll do the rural part first. Yes, there are large forested areas in the city of Ottawa that are protected, that are designated as no development at all. They're part of something called the Natural Heritage System, um, which is a designation in the city's official plan. And most of those are also recognized as significant woodlands under provincial guidelines, provincial legislation. So they have fairly strong protection. The Marlborough Forest, for example, which is a very large forest in the southern part of Ottawa, has that level of protection. It's unlikely to see now, even in 100 years, it'd be unlikely to see any urban type development encroaching into those areas. Official but you're quite right. Official plan policies don't necessarily mean enforcement, and don't necessarily mean that people can get around restrictions and damage some of these areas. And that's kind of very topical. Just today, I was working on notes for a bylaw which is called the site alteration bylaw, that the city is now considering, and it'll be coming to committee and council over the next couple of months. And it's trying to close those loopholes, because what we're finding is that even if something is designated as protected, and people know that they can't or shouldn't in areas adjacent to those protected areas, strip, clear cut land or initiate some kind of development, so long as they haven't yet applied to the city for a planning permit, so long as they haven't gone through the Planning Act application process, they sometimes preemptively make changes and then they apply. And then it's too late to apply the bylaw because whatever was there before is already gone. And so this bylaw is attempting to sort of close that gap, so that this type of preemptive clearing, this preemptive changes are notified, and there's city involvement to avoid damage to these areas. But the short answer is yes, there are large forested areas, and it is possible to protect them, and many are. So this whole natural heritage system, which is a very large area in a rural area, has that level of protection. In the core, in Centertown, for example, in Sandy Hill, in Lower Town, in those areas, yeah, the park space is very, very minimal, as you say, way under what the city's own park and recreations master plan calls for, which is something like 2 acres per 1,000 residents. You don't have that in Centertown, of course. And so it is a big struggle, and it's really about the value of land. Land in those areas is so valuable that it's very difficult for development of new parks. But right now, the only real tool that's there is to have developers make available. Developers, whenever they redevelop a property, have obligations to provide compensation for they call it cash in lieu, for green space or for park space for the additional residents that we brought in. The city is pushing to say we're not going to take cash anymore. We want land. So if you want to build here, we want land first, and only if you really if the developer exhausts, if it's impossible to provide land, then fine, the city will take cash. But it's just that there's just not enough cash to buy land enough to provide parks in the central area of Ottawa like that. So the biggest push we can hope for is that when there are redevelopments like that, that the developers are really held to providing land so that new parks can be established, even if it's just parkettes, even if it's just communicating parkettes that provide that, easier, closer access to green space in the core. But it's a real big challenge for sure.
Thank you very much.
Linda was next. Lynn.
Thank you very much, Paul. It was an excellent presentation. I'm so glad I attended.
Thank you.
I live in the Alta Vista area, and we love the green. I don't know if it would be officially green space, but Bryn's Way and the parks in this area are wonderful. And we often cycle through the Kilbourne allotment gardens. And I understand that they've been vulnerable for quite a long time because there were plans for a highway or a major road to go through. So I did approach our counselor, I guess last year, but she was newly elected. She's very good, but when she responded, it was not it wasn't a yes, they're safe answer. And I just wondered if you could comment on the hopefully that their life will go on, because it's a wonderful spot.
Right. Yeah, it's a very, very good question, and it brings up a number of interesting topics. We know Marty Carr. She was chair of the Alta Vista Community Association when before being elected, and so we knew her through that role, and so we know in general that her heart's in the right place. But as you know, she is quite new to the job. Half the council is quite new to the job.
Yeah.
And that makes it hard right now to work with this council because in the absence of that innate experience and knowledge, they tend to rely on the older hands that are there, and many of the older hands that are there aren't necessarily the ones that are going to guide them on the right path, shall I say. However, so the allotment gardens, it's not only there that they're vulnerable in a sense everywhere, because there's a real issue within the city of Ottawa as to who in fact manages the allotment gardens. There isn't one responsibility center. It's split out. Some is Parks and Recreation because it's in parks. Others, it's social services. Others, it's all spread out. And so there's no unified policy for those gardens in the community gardens in the city administration. And that's something we've been pushing for. One of our coalition members is Just Food. Just Food is an advocacy group that deals specifically with provision of food, growing of food locally, concerned about food security, concerned about equity in distribution of foods, that kind of thing. They're the champions, and they've been at it for over 20 years of establishing these gardens, community gardens, and being really the point people with the city for the gardens. So they're pushing to have this type of central responsibility established, to have someone in the city as the community gardens, I don't know, I'm not going to call it coordinator or something, so that these issues can be dealt with not only in that case, in our particular case. Now, in the case of the Kilbourne ones in particular, there is a roadway planned in that area, but it's been planned for over 30 years. In fact, what's prompted the creation of the Greenspace Alliance in 1997 were local residents that were concerned about that roadway, and they got together with a couple of other groups to try and advocate against it. The need and the rationale for that road hasn't been valid now for the last 20 years. But that item is still listed as a potential project in something called the Transportation Master Plan. So the Transportation Master Plan for this round of the official plan hasn't been published yet. They're at the stage called when they do the Transportation Master Plan, before doing it, they do something called the Origin and Destination Survey, which is a large survey that samples traffic and finds out who's going where at what time of day. And when they finish analyzing that, then they set out the planning priorities for transportation, which is basically the road priorities, over the next 25 years. We expect that the Alta Vista corridor is going to drop out of the priority list of the list. It shouldn't even be in there now. It's there just as a remnant. But if you or other residents wanted to advocate for something, advocate for dropping that project from the transportation master plan list, that'll be coming out over the next, coming out between now and 2025. Now's the time to really get that at that particular issue.
Great, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Welcome. Sherry or?
Yes, well, there was a question that was put into the chat actually, and I think it was not in the general chat, by Greg, who had to drop off the call. And his question was about the challenges of housing, especially affordable housing, and how the Greenspace Alliance resolves this tension of land use. Particularly, if or when housing development proposals are suggested on Greenspace.
Yeah. And that's right on the nose because because it's all about land use, right? So there's always competition for land use. And so if you're pushing housing, does that mean necessarily that you say, well, too bad, we have to get rid of green space? Or is there a way of doing both? And our view is that there's a way of doing both. We can accommodate, we can build more housing and preserve green space if we plan for it. If we have the policies and the bylaws established that take that as the goal. The city of Ottawa has a lot of space actually within the urban area for intensification. And when we say we need more housing, that really means more intensification. It means more denser housing. But we don't need intensification the way that we've seen intensification say in the last 10 or 15 years, where it's packed. We see what happens in neighborhoods where all of a sudden they get intensified heavily. We've been, again, one of our partners in the coalition is called Walkable Ottawa. It's run by an architect that is a member of the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association. And so this is a respected person who is aligned with the builders, who've been pushing for what she called, which is gentle intensification, achieving gentle density by having ways of transforming very slowly over time neighborhoods in a way that they become denser, without changing the character of the neighborhood, without building high rises or apartment towers everywhere. And as we showed, the geography of Ottawa is vast. Like the urban part of Ottawa, there's a lot of space for that type of intensification. And so with that type of intensification on one side, and on the other side, a proper tree protection bylaw, which we have now. I should have put that down as a win-win, because we really do have a very well thought out and effective tree protection bylaw that has been written in the context of intensification. So we know we need intensification. It's a goal and it's important, but it's also important to preserve trees. And so there's flexibility built into this bylaw that allows, and it'll be reflected in the new zoning bylaw that's coming out to implement the last official plan. The city's redoing its whole zoning bylaw. That flexibility will be there to allow for the building of multi-units, 2, 3, 4 max, on most lots, in a way that the zoning isn't so strict that the house has to be exactly there, exactly that size, that you can be flexible. And if it means changing a configuration of a floor plate for a house, moving the house in terms of on the lot rather than being necessarily in a particular so back and forth on the lot. If it serves to preserve some trees that are already there, some mature trees, so be it. Let's do that. So I think we have the bylaw, we have the policies to achieve that goal. We need denser, more urban development, including more affordable housing. Again, many of our coalition, our members are housing and affordable housing. And when we don't mean market affordability, we mean absolute affordability, low-income housing. That's a requirement. We can achieve both. And in fact, we have to achieve both. I mean, that's so if everyone has that as their objective, then it can be done.
Thank you, Paul.
I see Aaron.
Yes, I'm Aaron's dad, Bill. And I had a couple.
Oh yeah, Aaron's in it.
I have a couple of questions with regard to one would be you mentioned this architect lady that was as part of the alliance, and that kind of made me wonder to what degree is there direct consultation with the interest of the alliance with the developers, or is everything gone through the mediator of government, where there's more of an adversarial or oppositional relationship between those two parties that the government mediates? That was the first question. The second question is to what extent do you guys interface with the provincial and federal government in terms of advocating for things that affect this area?
Okay, thanks for the questions, both. First, our relationships with the development industry between the Greenspace Alliance and in a way our larger coalition. I think we both understand that we both have very legitimate goals. So if we start with that understanding, then it's possible to have a dialogue. It's possible to discuss. It's possible to find solutions. And sometimes it's possible then to learn new stuff that you don't know because you're not part of that industry, and they don't know because they're not part of our. So there is a way to and more we've been finding opportunities to exchange, to meet, to be part of common groups. We've been pressed on the city, for example, on consultation exercises. They used to consult us separately from the industry. And so they'd have consultations with the industry and then consultations with us, with environmental groups separately. We said, no, really, we don't want to participate in that kind of consultation anymore. Why don't you get us both in the same room and consult with us at the same time? And that's been happening more and more. On the zoning bylaw review that's happening right now, the city put together a stakeholders group for a pre-consultation. So, and that included civil society members, a wide range, and industry members, a wide range. And it really was a very positive and constructive dialogue that happened through there. And I think we'll see in the new zoning bylaw that will be presented soon, May 31st, actually, the first draft of the new zoning bylaw is going to be published by the city. We'll see the result of that dialogue reflected in that very, very important policy instrument that's coming forward. So I think more and more we realize on both sides that the adversarial approach isn't productive, and that there are opportunities to actually find common ground on particular files in particular cases. Doesn't mean we can always agree, but there's more mutual respect, I would say, in how that relationship is going on. In terms of provincial and federal, most of the immediate policy regime that affects green space and land use in Ottawa is municipal, but the municipality is really just a creature of the provincial government, and it operates under legislation established by the provincial government. And mostly there's two acts: the Planning Act, very important in terms of how it regulates what the city can and can't do, and the Municipal Act, which we're less involved in, which also it sets the parameters for what a city can and can't do. But under the Planning Act, there's something called the provincial, used to be called the Provincial Policy Statement. Now it's called the Provincial Planning Statement. Detailed policies that have to be met by the city in their planning decisions. So the current provincial government has been shooting out omnibus bill after omnibus bill over the last year and a half, 2 years, all towards accelerating building, simplifying building houses, reducing paperwork and red tape for building and so on, but often with very dubious and damaging side effects built in. So we've engaged in working with the city, but also directly with our partners in responding to those proposals from the provincial government, submitting through our MPPs and directly to the provincial government through something called the environmental register, where these things are posted for comment. And so we've been very active with our partners in interacting with the province in that way. Similarly, the federal government doesn't have any ubiquitous legislation dealing with local matters, but it does have legislation that affects us, and being owners of the land, the federal land here, so through the NCC, through PSPC, Public Services and Procurement Canada, we interact with the federal government in that way to protect green space. We had a big campaign, for example, to protect this centenarian elm on Parliament Hill when they were starting the whole refurbishment of the 10-year renovation of Center Block on Parliament Hill. And through that, we fought to preserve that elm for a long time. We lost that fight, but we established a very good relationship with PSPC. We were then invited to be part of consultations for the regreening of Parliament Hill, because they did a lot of work there to regreen the whole hill, and they've saved some saplings, some cuttings actually from that elm, though, which had been found to be resistant to the Dutch elm disease, and sent them to Guelph Agricultural College, where saplings were grown, and we expect that those are going to be sent back to Ottawa and planted on Parliament Hill, so that we'll once again have elms there like we did when I was a kid on Parliament Hill. So those are the types of interactions that we have provincially, federally, on specific files, that kind of thing.
And one more little thing. Can you say how one would join your organization as a member?
Absolutely, and we're always accepting new members. And if you go to our website, there's an application dialogue. You could and if that's complicated, you could just send an email to our email address, contact@greenspace-alliance.ca, and we'll happily send you what information is necessary to have you join the Alliance. We're a membership organization, and so you'll have to pay membership fees, but it'll be it's $15. So don't worry, it's not. And we can even give you a rebate. But
very good, thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Friends,
no, it's not very much.
No, thank you very much. We usually try to wrap up around 9 o'clock, and we're there. But if anyone has, any last comments, questions, or, observations based on the discussions that they want to get out there, and now's your opportunity. And we look like we're all very satisfied, and so we'll move on. I want to. Oh, Linda,
I just
go
wanted to
ahead.
make a quick comment and just say how wonderful the plaque is near us in Grasshopper Hill Park. It's one of the Poets Pathway plaques.
Yeah.
John Henry Brown. And every time I read it, I get choked up. It's a beautiful poem. And I always say, John Henry Brown, you are not a minor poet, because it says minor poet at the bottom. Anyway, it's wonderful. And thank you very much for that.
I'm so glad someone's been there to see it. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. That's a great note to kind of close up now. I want to thank Paul for the presentation, Masa for the beautiful music, Carol for the wonderful devotional program, and Aaron for running the Zoom, and everyone else for their attendance and participation this evening. Once more, I would like to remind the friends of our next Environmental Cafe gathering, which will be on Tuesday, June 25th at 7:30. And will feature a presentation by Michael Banks, the Vice President of Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa, titled EVs, Current Information, Trends, and Dispelling Myths. Mike is the Vice President of the Electric Vehicle Council and has been an EV owner since 2017. And he's owned gas, diesel, plug-in hybrid, and fully electric vehicles, and as well uses and supports public transit, and waiting for Line 2 LRT to open. So I'm sure that's going to be very, very informative, and a lot of useful information and resources. So save the date for Mike's talk on your calendar. We look forward to seeing you all again soon. Have a wonderful evening and stay well.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Paul.
Good night.
Thank you. Good
Exceptional.
night.
You're very, very welcome. I
night.
enjoyed it very
Good
much.
night.